Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Hostas can be beautiful, large plants. Sometimes they get too big. Today, we're going to show you how to divide your hostas. Also, systemic, surfactant, translocation are gardening terms we toss around a lot. But what do they mean? Today, we're going to define some gardening terms. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Cheryl Lockhart. Michelle is a master gardener right here in Shelby County. And Dr. Kelly is here. Dr. Kelly is a horticulture specialist, Mississippi State University Extension. Thanks for joining me, ladies.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, look, we're going to learn how to divide hostas. Michelle's going to show us all about it. So where do you want to start?
Well, I brought a couple of hostas this morning, and I wanted to say, first of all, you don't necessarily have to divide your hostas.
You don't have to, okay.
But if they are too big in your garden and you want to spread them around your yard, by all means, you can divide them, and now is a good time to do that because it's fall now.
Okay.
The air is cooler at the night. It's not so hot in the daytime. Your garden should be workable. Your garden beds, if you're in your flower beds, or I grow many of my hostas in pots because I have a vole problem and also tree roots. So if you're going to, before you begin dividing your hostas, I please urge everyone to look at your hostas. You do not want to divide a hosta that has a disease. You do not want to divide a hosta that has nematodes, which is a little microscopic worm that crawls up the leaf blade, and you can see it in the leaf blade. It would be in the blade itself, and it would be like a little brown strip. And if you have nematodes, they are definitely evident now in the garden. You may not see them in the spring, but you will see them now. Do not divide a hosta that has nematodes. They're spread by water droplets, and I don't want them. Also, if you have a hosta that may have hostavirus X, which is, you can see that by, these hostas do not have any diseases. If this hosta had hostavirus X, you would see bleeding in the veins of the hosta. It looks like if you had watercolors and you dropped it on a napkin, it would sort of like bleed out. Or the leaf itself might be puckered or misshapen in some way, and you do not want to divide a hosta that has hostavirus X. Both those diseases are being studied by the American Hosta Society. They are sponsoring studies to eliminate those diseases, or at least find out more about them. So if you have a hosta in a pot, and I brought mine, this little hosta right here, it was in a pot. It is got a lot of roots. It's very root bound. Hostas do like to be root bound, but I am ready to divide this one. Before I came, I took it out of the pot. I washed it off really well so you could see the roots.
Looks good. Fibrous?
Yes, they do. They're nice roots. I also dipped it in a little bit of, in my water, I soaked it. Water, water, water before you divide. I soaked it in some water that had just a little bit of bleach in it, like 1 part bleach, 9 parts water, in case there were any bacteria or anything. It doesn't hurt the hosta, and it helps in the...
I smelled bleach.
That's right. I soaked them both. Now, lots of roots. Before I put it in a pot, I want to kind of spread my roots out, and I watered it well. Like I said, water, water, water. Hostas love water, but they don't want to be too much water. You have to have a good porous soil. So for this hosta, it's kind of hard to see, but we're going to just divide it. I'm just going to cut it right here.
So you can just dive in and just be violent?
I'm just dividing it. I'm just going to dive right in. Now, you don't want to divide a hosta too much, because if you've heard of peep, creep, leap. So if you have a big, beautiful hosta at home in your garden bed, and it is gorgeous and big, and you decide that you want to divide it, you may not ever, it may or may not get that big and beautiful again. But if you want to move it around your garden, that's all right. Take a couple of years to come to maturity again. All right, so now, if I had more water, I would have divided this up. But what I want to do is, I have a good loose soil here. And I have taken, since I'm putting them in pots, I took a potting soil mix. Okay, and I also add to it, I add soil conditioner, and I also add, you can buy a soil that's for trees and shrubs. It has a lot of bark in it. I want a good porous soil. That's what I'm trying to do. I want good drainage. Good drainage.
And usually that's especially like pine bark.
Yeah, that's right. What it looks like is in it.
That's what it is. So let me just put some soil in here real quick. All right, now, that's enough to start. And we do not want to bury them too deep. If you're in your garden, in your flower bed, make your hole wider than deep. They want to be at the same level, and you want to, the soil needs to be workable, but you don't want to bury it deep. You make a little, either in the pot or in the ground, make a little cone shape. If you have problems with voles, which some people do, you can, if you like, take some pea gravel or crushed rock and put it around your cone right here in the garden bed. Then you take your hosta here in the, I don't need it here in the pot. We're going to spread our roots out just a little bit.
Pull them apart, huh?
Right, We want to, maybe I have a little too much dirt. That's all right. This is just demonstration. Put it right in here, kind of spread them out, set them up on this little cone, spread the roots out, spread them down, and
just fill.
And just fill it up.
You might have done this a time or two, huh?
Oh, yeah, I would say I've done this a few times. I need to go down here where it won't spread and get all over your table.
Oh, that's all right.
All right.
You just can't do this without making a mess.
That's right.
Nope, it's going to be messy. Okay, now it's making a good porous soil.
It is, yeah.
It has a lot of pine bark mulch, pine bark in it and mulch, and so it's good and porous. And if we were outside, I would water this well. You don't need to fertilize now, but I'm dividing my hostas now so that they have time to settle in the ground and kind of get acclimated to their new location before it frosts.
Good deal.
Okay.
Now, while we have some time left,
all right.
you want to try to...
All right. This hosta is a hosta guacamole.
Guacamole.
I'm going to put this down here.
Okay.
Hosta guacamole, one of my favorites. This is an easy hosta to grow here in the Mid-South.
Nice.
I also took this one out of a pot. It was pretty root bound, and I've already washed it, and I soaked it in a little bit of bleach water. And I was going to divide it, and pull off all this funk. If your hostas are starting to go down like this, if you wanted to cut them off now, you can do that, but you don't have to do that.
Okay.
This one, when it was in a pot, it's still beautiful. I'm not ready to cut this off. I'm still ready to let it show off in my garden because it is beautiful. But as I washed this hosta, it just sort of fell apart. So,
again, nice fibrous roots.
Yeah.
yes, very good
healthy
roots.
looking.
And try not to cut them if you can help it. But if you can just pull them apart.
Okay.
Like a bad
like
hair
this.
day, right?
It looks like
So this one didn't really need to be cut, but it just came apart so well.
Okay.
All right, and then since this is a nice big piece, I don't want to divide it too much.
Okay.
I want it to be able to come back and be beautiful again next year and the year after that and the year after that.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave this big one just the way it is. And we'll take out some of this yellow that I don't need.
Okay.
Okay, and I have a big, heavy pot, and these are perfect pots for staying out in the yard. No problem at all.
Let me get this up for you.
All right.
So the freeze won't hurt them like
Not
it
at
does
all.
some ceramic pots.
Not at all. And by the way, when I get done or when I go home, I will put some pine bark mulch around this, some soil conditioner, and you should do that in the garden bed as well because
You want me to dump it in for you?
That'd be great. You don't want to have them
I'll let you direct me.
heave out in the wintertime.
Let me know when now.
Okay, whoa right there.
Okay.
Whoa, right there.
Whoa, she says. Okay.
So we want to, now I know it doesn't look pretty now, but that doesn't matter. We're worried about springtime. I'm going to spread my roots out.
Pretty good to me.
Spread my roots out. Now you want to pour some more dirt in here for me? Okay. And I was speaking of heaving out of the ground. You know what that means. If the way the winters are, it can be warm, then cold, then warm, then cold, and that can make the hosta heave out of the ground, and we do not want that to happen because once they come out,
make sure it comes out.
Here, let's set it down. I'll just pick it
Okay.
up. You want it to stay in the ground because if they come out and you're not out there in the wintertime, when you go back and you have a hosta that is just sitting on top of the ground, it is frozen and it will just die.
All right, Ms. Cheryl, we appreciate the demonstration that you've done for us today.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
much. All right. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Dr. Kelly, gardening terms. And the first one up is systemic. And we like these gardening terms, don't we?
Oh,
we
indeed.
use them all the time.
Indeed.
Our writings
yeah.
and things like that.
And you know, when you started the intro for the segment and you said we throw them around a lot, I'm thinking, well, maybe you and I do, but
Yeah,
you know,
we do.
maybe a lot of the gardening public may not know. I know they've heard them, they've
Sure.
probably read them, and then on the backs of pesticide labels, they may see the word systemic and all
Yes.
this stuff. So what does that mean?
All right.
You know, and when you see it, it's usually in reference to how pesticides move through the plant. That's what it means. So if you have a systemic insecticide, that means that as you put it, it's soluble enough in water that it can actually be taken up through the tissues of the plant and translocated, which is another one of our terms
Right.
we're going to talk about, throughout the plant to give that insecticidal or fungicide or whatever it is, you know, to protect that plant against the disease or the insect.
Okay.
And herbicides do that as well.
They do.
You know, glyphosate, Roundup, it translocates, so it's a systemic herbicide, you know, so it's a term that,
Systemic.
yeah,
we say that a
systemic.
lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Now with systemic, we have to talk about surfactants.
That's right, that's right. Sometimes when you have a pesticide or a chemical and you're trying to mix it with water, it doesn't want to mix well. And so sometimes the label may recommend you put in a surfactant. And what that's going to do is to make that mix better. And then when you put it on the plant, it kind of breaks that surface tension and makes that whatever the chemical is or the solution is, adhere to that plant better. Sometimes you'll spray it, and if you don't have a surfactant, it sort of beads up and runs off.
Right.
So that's what the surfactant does, and it's a lot of times it's a detergent.
Right.
You know, that they use to add to a mix, a chemical mix, to get it in solution and make it, you know, maybe adhere to the plant. But that's what that is.
Yeah, so I always tell folks a couple of drops of Joy, Dawn dishwashing liquid or something like that to get the job done.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get to translocation since you mentioned that earlier when we were talking about systemic.
Yeah, that's a good one, you know, and when we think about translocation, that's just movement, throughout the plant. That's all that means. Stuff that's translocated. And usually it's through the vascular system of the plant, you know, through the, like our arteries and veins, which is, you know, we'll throw out a couple more big terms, phloem and xylem.
Right, that's right. And I always remember xylem is Zahai.
Yeah.
It takes water up.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to remember which one's which. I always have to kind of think about it. One's moving up, and one's moving down.
Yeah, phloem is moving down. Yeah, I
Yep.
remember that from classes. How
Yep.
about that? All right, so that's translocation. Now, what about transpiration?
Yeah, it's a little different. That's
a little different.
it's kind of like perspiration, sort of, for
Like
people.
sweating, yeah.
Yeah. But let's see, transpiration is the movement of moisture through a plant, originating probably from the roots, and then the moisture comes out all the way up through some cells in the leaves that are called stomata, and that at that time it's water vapor. Transpiration is the movement of moisture through the plant, and it's released as water vapor. And fruit even transpires. And it's you can put, for example, if you know how if you put some plant material or some cuttings in a plastic bag, and then if you've got them out where the sun hits them, which makes transpiration work faster because that triggers those cells to open, you know, and so the vapor comes out, and you'll get all that condensate, you know, in that's
the bag.
that's the result of transpiration.
Right.
And that's a good way to illustrate it to kids.
It
You
is.
know, this is how water moves through the plant and water vapor comes out.
Yeah, so the plant's essentially trying to cool itself.
Yeah. Yep. It's kind of like we kind of perspire, I
Right.
guess. Same thing. Sort of.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. Now, how about cold frame? So this is a term we're hearing a lot more about these days.
Yeah. It's, well, you use a cold frame as a sort of a season extender, kind of like the high tunnel we're going to talk about in a minute, but just on a much smaller scale. And a cold frame, typically, when people think of a cold frame, they kind of comes to mind that it's just something that out of blocks or concrete blocks or wood, and it has maybe a window sash over it or a transparent top. And it's usually, it tilts, you know, like this, it could be shaped like this, and the window sash is here, and then it's got the concrete blocks, and you open that up, and it's tilted or leaned, you know, it's higher to the north, but lower to the south, so that it catches, you know, the southern sun. During the fall and the early spring, it's like people can start cuttings. They can kind of protect plants from cold. They're not heated. That's the reason they're called a cold frame.
Right.
But it's just sort of a little plant protection, you know, for cool weather. A lot of people even overwinter some of their more tender plants in a
I've seen
cold
that.
frame. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
A lot of folks are using the cold frames now, and they're also using high tunnels.
Yeah.
'Cause I know a lot of producers here in Shelby
Right.
County are using high
Yeah,
tunnels now.
yeah. And
for
that-
tomatoes and some other of their
Right.
fruits. So.
And that's a term to me that is just another name for something we already had, because a high tunnel is just a cold frame
Yeah.
greenhouse. That's all it is. It is an unheated house, usually Quonset, you know, or a bow shut, you know, round like this, semicircle, and it's covered with one sheet of plastic.
Right.
And a lot of, say, vegetable farmers or cut flower producers, they use those as, again, season extenders, and they're actually growing crops early, like people will grow to get a start on the season of their tomatoes. They'll
Yeah,
grow them in
yeah.
the high tunnel, and they're able to pull up the sides or ventilate it because they're unheated, but yet as the season goes on, see in the spring, it can get pretty hot in there.
Yeah.
So it needs to be able to either open the ends or roll the sides up or something. And even some people kind of put it where they can slide the whole house
seen that.
to another location. And usually in the high tunnel, crops and plants are grown in the ground.
Right.
They're not up on benches or something.
Right.
So it's just a unheated season extender. And sometimes they'll have supplemental heat just in case that the weather gets really, really cold one night and you don't want your, you know, tomato plants or your cut flowers or whatever,
freeze.
cucumbers, whatever you're growing, you know. Some people grow strawberries even in them
Okay.
to get a little earlier season on that.
All right. Well, we have a little time left, and since we were talking about tomatoes, determinate versus indeterminate.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised how many people really don't know what that means, and they grow a lot of tomatoes.
That's right.
And they'll say, well, you know, my tomatoes just set all their fruit and then they were done. Well, that's the determinant. That means it's set a determined time that it's going to produce, and those are usually commercial varieties, so everything gets ripe and harvests at one time, and that's really a good thing for a commercial
Sure it is.
producer. But see, that for the home gardener, you know, if they have the room, see, indeterminate varieties, as long as they're growing and flowering, they're putting on fruit. So they can wind up being pretty darn big by the end of the season. You know,
Right.
you might need a step ladder to get. But, you know, some of the varieties that are determinate are Roma. Celebrity is a common, but it's sort of semi-determinate. It can get a little bigger than what's, you know, the regular just in varieties of determinate. Mountain Spring, Mountain, there's some of those new ones in the commercial end that are determinate. But for the indeterminate, they're like Better Boy, Big
Yeah,
Boy,
Better Boy, Big
Early
Boy,
Girl, all the little cherry tomatoes that just keep going, like Million, what's that, Sweet Million?
Yeah.
You know, that thing can just cover up your house and go over and, you know, keep
Generally
going.
the ones you see at the big box stores.
Yeah.
You know, for the most part.
Yeah. So that's the difference.
All right, so
know?
that's the difference.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Kelly, gardening terms by Dr. Kelly. I like that session. All right, so here's our Q&A session. Michelle, you jump in there with us and help us out, okay?
All right.
All right, here's our first of your email. When do you plant poppies and where do you get them? How about that one, Dr. Kelly?
Okay.
So
Well-
when do you plant poppies?
Well, we're going to make an assumption they're talking about annual poppies
Yes.
because there are perennial poppies.
Okay.
And of course, the annual ones is what typically most gardeners grow because, like the Shirley poppy, corn poppies, Flanders poppies, those are all very common, you know, flowering pretty poppies that we have in the South. And the fall is when we plant them.
In the fall.
Yeah, and there's to go online and find all kind of
Yeah, you
seed
can get 'em
sources.
online.
You can get them at garden centers, maybe still on the seed racks. I'm not sure if they're, you know, a lot of those seed racks are already depleted, but sometimes you can find them locally, but a lot of times you may have to go online. But yeah, you need to plant them now. It's a
Okay.
good time.
Good time.
Yep,
Nice, fertile soil, well drained.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it'll
Full
work for you.
sun.
Full sun.
Full sun.
That's right.
Full
Full
sun.
sun. It'll
Yep.
work for you.
And
All
they'll
right.
bloom next spring.
Yes. That's right. All right, here's our next question. My hosta leaves are turning yellow. Should I be concerned? And guess what? We just happen to have a hosta expert right here on set, Ms. Cheryl. Why don't you help us out with this one?
It's time of the year. The
Time of the year,
hostas- It's fall now. The hostas are not actively growing. They're just there in the ground, and you can divide them now, as I said. Or if they look ugly, you can cut them off. You might even get a little flush later if we get a lot of rain and if it warms up just a little bit. You do not have to worry about it. Cut them off, cut them to the ground. You do not want a lot of mulch on top of the hostas. You
Okay.
want clean flower
Clean
beds.
flower bed.
Or if they look pretty, leave them alone. Let them look pretty.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about that?
Yeah,
Anything to
that
add
sounds
with that,
good.
Doc?
No, I would just say, you know, on this one right here, for example, I'd probably come in here and just cut these off.
Okay.
And enjoy
And
the
then,
green.
yeah, you could even get a pair of scissors and do a little, you know, hair cutting on these, you know, brown areas. Here, I have done that on mine too, just to kind of spruce
Yeah,
it
I just
up for
cut
the
mine
fall
off.
garden.
That's right.
Yeah. Still have a little green, but get rid of the, you know, just take those off.
Just take them off.
And once it all turns yellow and goes down, just take all those leaves off the bed and clean your bed. Clean
Clean your bed.
beds.
Clean beds. I knew you could handle that for us. We appreciate
Clean
that.
your bed.
All right, so here's our next question. Is it too early to plant tulips?
Yeah,
think about
short answer, yes.
Think it's too early
Yeah,
for
I
that?
think
yes.
a lot of people ask that question because, you know, the stores are all getting in their fall.
Yes.
The bulbs that bloom in the spring bloomers, but we plant them in the fall. And it's important to remember, you know, the way these things grow because what they do in nature is the foliage is gone on all the spring bulbs this time of year.
Right.
So what they're doing is they're just sitting there dormant, and if you buy the bulbs and then you go ahead and plant them now, what's going to happen is the warm temperatures, the warm soil temperature is going to make that bulb sprout with foliage before it gets a really good root system developed. So you want to wait until, even for tulips, I would wait till even in November,
I would too.
Thanksgiving.
I sure
You
would.
know, when the ground is good and cool, you're going to get that really great root development, and then it's going to shoot up the foliage when it's supposed to,
Okay.
you know, in the early spring and then flower.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that recommendation. I would wait till around that time as well.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
All right, so here's our next viewer email. In May, I took 2 cuttings from a fig tree in Jackson, Mississippi. They seem to be growing very well. They are in 1.75 gallon planters. One is 15 inches high, one is about 12 inches high. The smaller one has recently lost 1 leaf. There it is on the screen. What should I do with these small figs over the winter? One question. Next question, is it time to put them in the ground? This is Robin from
Oxford, Mississippi. Yeah,
So how about
yeah.
this, Robin? So what
Well-
should she do for the winter time?
Well, congratulations on rooting the figs.
Oh,
That's
yes.
great.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah, because
That's
that's the
good.
way a lot of people do it. But I usually just let the branch come down and then, you know, cut the branch off. That's easier. She did it the hard way, which is really, really a good way to do it. But anyway, what I do, since we're going into the fall,
Yes.
I would wait. I'd keep them in the pot until they lose all their leaves and go dormant.
Right.
And that would be, I don't know, maybe December, January. Then she can put them in the ground.
Right.
But just be mindful that this will be their first growing season next year, so she really needs to be careful about watering and being, you know, even during the dormant time. If she gets them out, say January, after they lose their leaves, keep them in the pot this fall, keep them watered, let them go dormant. January, February, put them in the ground where she wants them to grow, and then just keep a good eye on them as far as keeping them watered.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. They have to be watered during the dormant.
They do. Yeah, a lot of people don't think about
yeah,
that.
they don't think
if
about
it's
it.
dormant,
Right.
it doesn't. But they're transpiring,
There's the term.
not just through the leaves. They can transpire through, you know, the actual tissue, stem tissue and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
still
going
has
to
to
be
be
losing
watered.
moisture, yeah.
Okay. And you get that in the ground, it should work wonderfully for you.
Yeah.
Well-drained soils again, full sun. I think
Full
it should
sun,
be,
that's right.
just fine.
Yep.
Good. All right, Michelle, Dr. Kelly, we're out of time.
All right.
All right. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us a letter or an email with your gardening questions. Send your email to familyplot@wkno.org. The mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next time for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.